Once upon a time, after a long, grueling day of hard work, there was nothing more satisfying than sitting down to a hearty, home-cooked meal. These weren't the kind of meals we rush through today, where takeout bags pile up, or we settle for something quick and forgettable. No, these were the meals that meant something. The kind of meals that could only be enjoyed after a long shift on the factory floor, a day in the fields, or hours spent toiling in the trades. They were simple, yet fulfilling, made from ingredients that might seem plain to some, but were, in their simplicity, a source of comfort, pride, and strength. Imagine the scene. It's the 1950s or 60s, and the workday is done. The smell of frying chicken, simmering stews, and baking bread fills the air. The table is set, not just with food, but with love. Each dish a testament to the sweat and labor of the day. Dinners like country fried steak with gravy, meatloaf, and a pot of simmering chili weren't just meals. They were a well-earned reward, a symbol of resilience, resourcefulness, and family. Fast forward to today, and many of these meals have disappeared from our tables. We've become so busy, so consumed with convenience, that we've forgotten the beauty of a meal that takes time, care, and heart to prepare. The humble fried chicken, the steaming bowl of mashed potatoes, and the pot roast that filled a home with warmth are slowly being replaced by prepackaged options or hurriedly eaten fast food. But what have we lost in the process? This series is a tribute to those forgotten dinners. The meals that were passed down from one generation to the next, each bite carrying with it a story of hard work and love. These working man's dinners were more than just fuel. They were moments of connection, laughter, and tradition. And today, we're going to bring them back. Let's remember the dishes that once made the working class dinner table a place of comfort, a place of home. 1. Country fried steak with gravy.
Crispy breaded country fried steaks. It's all about technique. Don't miss these crucial steps to getting that crispy perfection.
If there's one dish that embodies the spirit of working class meals, it's country fried steak with gravy. It's the kind of meal that fills a plate and satisfies the belly, a dish born from the southern kitchen, but beloved all over America. The moment that sizzling sound fills the air as the breaded steak hits the hot oil, you know something special is about to happen. The crispy crust, golden brown and tender on the inside, is smothered in a rich, creamy gravy that binds everything together with its warmth and comfort. Country fried steak has its roots in Southern and Midwestern traditions, and like many great American dishes, it's a result of necessity. Beef was plentiful, but not always the most tender cut, which is where the frying technique came into play. By breading and frying a tougher cut of steak, you'd end up with something tender, juicy, and flavorful, perfect for the long hours worked on farms or in factories. Back in the day, this meal was a mainstay for those who came home after laboring long shifts, and the gravy was the secret weapon. It wasn't just about flavor, it was a way to stretch the meal, to make sure the family had enough to eat without breaking the bank. The gravy could be made from the pan drippings, a little flour, and milk, ingredients that most households kept on hand. It was a brilliant example of the resourcefulness that defined working-class cooking. The beauty of country fried steak lies in its simplicity. The breading is usually just a mix of flour, salt, and pepper, creating a light crust that gives way to a tender piece of meat. The gravy, rich and creamy, ties everything together. And while the dish is often served with mashed potatoes, the real star is the steak itself. It's a meal that doesn't need anything fancy, just a few honest ingredients and a little bit of care. There's a certain satisfaction in the act of preparing this meal too. The process of breading the steak, frying it just right, and ladling that thick gravy over the top feels like a celebration of the work it takes to bring food to the table. And when the family gathers around, you know that this meal isn't just about filling stomachs. It's about coming together after a day of hard work, sharing a meal that was made with love and a little bit of sweat. The warmth and comfort this meal provides, it's a reminder of a time when the kitchen was the heart of the home and dinner was a moment of pride. 2. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes.
Now, I'm gonna make a dish today that is very, very typical in terms of Americana. Really popular in the 50s, and the name can also be kind of a turnoff. I'm talking meatloaf.
There's something undeniably comforting about a big, juicy meatloaf sitting next to a mound of creamy mashed potatoes. It's a dish that evokes images of home kitchens in the 1950s and 1960s, when families sat down to hearty, no-fuss dinners at the end of long days. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes were the unsung heroes of the working-class dinner table. filling, simple, and deeply satisfying. Meatloaf's origins go way back, but its rise in popularity coincided with the Great Depression and World War II, when families needed a way to stretch their food budgets. Ground meat, usually beef or a mixture of beef and pork, was affordable and versatile. The key to a great meatloaf was in the seasoning: salt, pepper, garlic, and perhaps a bit of Worcestershire sauce. It could be made in large batches, and leftovers could be used the next day in sandwiches or turned into a new meal entirely. The beauty of meatloaf is its flexibility. Some recipes called for breadcrumbs, while others used oats or rice to hold everything together. In many households, the loaf was topped with a ketchup glaze. Sweet and tangy, it added a layer of flavor that transformed the humble loaf into something special. The meatloaf would bake for hours, filling the house with the irresistible smell of savory comfort. And then there were the mashed potatoes. Creamy, buttery, and perfectly whipped, they were the ideal side dish to accompany the meatloaf. What could be better than a warm, soft mound of potatoes that soaked up the savory juices from the meatloaf? The mashed potatoes, often prepared with butter, milk, and a pinch of salt, were the perfect counterpoint to the hearty richness of the meatloaf. For many working families, this was dinner at its best: simple, filling, and incredibly satisfying. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes also offered something else that was incredibly important during those days. They were meals that could feed a crowd without costing a fortune. When times were tough, families could count on meatloaf to feed them for days, and it was a dish that kept everyone full long into the night. This meal wasn't just about food, it was about resourcefulness and care. It represented a mother's love for her family, as she worked tirelessly to ensure there was always enough on the table. Sitting down to a plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes wasn't just about eating, it was about gathering as a family, sharing stories, and finding comfort in the routine of a well-loved meal. It was the epitome of simple working-class cuisine, and it still holds a place in our hearts today. 3. Biscuits and sausage gravy. There are few meals that embody the essence of comfort quite like biscuits and sausage gravy. It's the kind of dish that could fill you up after a long day of labor, a warm plate of food that could chase away any lingering fatigue. Originating from the Southern kitchen, this hearty breakfast-turned-dinner has become a beloved part of American comfort food. The flaky, buttery biscuits, the rich, savory sausage gravy. This meal is the very definition of home-cooked goodness. Biscuits and sausage gravy have deep roots in Southern and rural American cooking. In the days before convenience foods, biscuits were a staple in every household. Made from just flour, butter, milk, and a touch of baking powder, they were quick to prepare and could be enjoyed with just about anything. Whether served alongside fried chicken or topped with honey, biscuits were versatile and always comforting. The real star of the show, however, was the sausage gravy. Ground sausage, usually pork, was cooked down with onions and a bit of flour, which created a thick, creamy sauce that could be ladled over the warm biscuits. It's the kind of gravy that makes you feel full just by looking at it. Rich, indulgent, and savory. Some families would add a bit of black pepper or cayenne to give the gravy a little kick, while others kept it simple, allowing the natural flavors of the sausage to shine through. For working-class families, biscuits and sausage gravy became a go-to meal because it was not only satisfying, but inexpensive. Flour and sausage were affordable, and the meal could be whipped up in no time. It didn't matter if you were a factory worker or a farmer. This dish could feed you well and keep you going through the day's hard work. The beauty of this dish lies in its simplicity. It didn't need fancy ingredients or complicated techniques, just a few basic staples, a bit of patience, and the love of a cook who wanted to provide something special for their family. Biscuits and sausage gravy were also a meal that brought families together. Whether served for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, it was a meal that invited everyone to the table, encouraged conversation, and brought comfort. For many, biscuits and sausage gravy symbolize a simpler time, a time when meals were made with heart and intention, and the kitchen was where families gathered after a long day's work. It's a meal that will always be cherished, a reminder of the way food once brought us together, nourished us, and made us feel at home. 4. Shepherd's pie. In a world where leftovers are often neglected, shepherd's pie stands as a proud reminder of the magic that can happen when you turn yesterday's food into today's feast. It's a dish born out of necessity, but elevated through its comforting combination of flavors and textures. Layers of seasoned ground meat, tender vegetables, and creamy mashed potatoes come together in a perfect union, offering a meal that could stretch ingredients and satisfy even the hardest working people. Shepherd's pie originated in the British Isles, where it was known as cottage pie when made with beef and shepherd's pie when made with lamb. In either case, the pie was designed as a way to use up leftover meat, a meal that could feed a family without breaking the bank. The concept was simple: Leftover meat was combined with vegetables and topped with mashed potatoes, then baked until golden and bubbly. In an era when food was often scarce, dishes like shepherd's pie became a symbol of resourcefulness and care. In America, shepherd's pie found a home in working-class kitchens, particularly in the 1940s and 1950s, when families were looking for ways to make their meals stretch further. Ground beef, carrots, peas, and mashed potatoes were common ingredients, things that most families had on hand, especially during the winter months. The beauty of shepherd's pie was its versatility. You could use whatever vegetables were in season, and the filling could be adapted based on what was available. It was the perfect example of how a working-class meal could be created out of humble ingredients. The preparation of shepherd's pie was a labor of love. First, the meat was browned and seasoned with onions, garlic, and herbs. Then, the vegetables were added, creating a savory filling that would become the base of the pie. The mashed potatoes, smooth and rich, were spread over the top, forming a fluffy crust that sealed in all the goodness beneath. The pie would bake until the top was golden and slightly crispy, offering a satisfying crunch with each bite. For many, shepherd's pie became a comforting tradition, a meal that could be made in advance, fed a crowd, and be enjoyed for days. It wasn't just about eating, it was about making something out of what you had and creating a meal that could nourish and sustain. It was about bringing the family together around the table, sharing stories, and savoring the warmth of a home-cooked meal after a long day's work. 5. Chicken and dumplings. If you've ever had a steaming bowl of chicken and dumplings, you know there's nothing quite as comforting. This humble dish, rich with history and flavor, is the epitome of working-class comfort food. The soft, fluffy dumplings floating in a savory, chicken-filled broth offer a taste of home and a reminder of simpler times when food was prepared with care and love. The origins of chicken and dumplings date back to the early days of American settlers. It's believed to have evolved from European traditions, with the dumplings themselves having roots in British and German cooking. Early versions of the dish were simple and hearty, made with whatever ingredients were available at the time. Chicken, flour, and a bit of seasoning were all you needed to create a meal that could feed a family and provide the warmth and sustenance needed after a long day of hard work. In the South, where chicken was a staple protein, chicken and dumplings became a beloved dish for workers who needed something filling and satisfying. The beauty of this dish was in its simplicity. A whole chicken was simmered in a pot of water to create a flavorful broth, and once the chicken was tender, dumplings made from flour, butter, and milk were added. The dumplings would puff up, soaking up the savory broth, creating a meal that felt like a big, warm hug from the inside. The broth was the heart of the dish, a rich, flavorful base that brought everything together. It wasn't just about the chicken, it was about the way the dumplings absorbed all the flavors, becoming little pockets of comfort. The dish was often served with a side of cornbread or biscuits, offering even more heartiness to the meal. Chicken and dumplings were a perfect example of how a working-class meal didn't need to be expensive or complicated. It was a dish that could be made with just a few ingredients, yet it was incredibly satisfying. It was about taking something simple and turning it into something special. For many families, this meal represented the care and effort that went into feeding loved ones after a long, hard day. It wasn't just about food, it was about sharing a moment together, savoring a meal that could warm both the body and the soul. 6. Chili. There are few meals that bring people together quite like a steaming bowl of chili. Thick, rich, and full of warmth, chili has long been a favorite among working-class families, particularly in colder months. Its versatility, simplicity, and ability to feed a crowd make it the perfect dish for busy families who need something hearty and satisfying. Chili's origins are often debated, but it's clear that the dish has roots in Texas and the Southwest, where chili con carne, beef stew seasoned with chili peppers, was a common meal. The dish gained widespread popularity across the U.S. during the 20th century, as people found ways to adapt it to their tastes and budgets. For working-class families, chili became a go-to dinner, especially because it could be made in large batches, stretched to feed several people, and eaten for days. Chili is a perfect example of how working-class meals often revolved around inexpensive, staple ingredients like beans and ground beef. Ground beef, which was affordable and easy to cook, formed the base of most chili recipes. Combined with beans, kidney beans, pinto beans, or even black beans, chili became a hearty, protein-packed meal that could stretch a little meat over several servings. Tomatoes, onions, and garlic brought layers of flavor, while the heat from chili peppers and the richness of cumin and chili powder gave the dish its signature warmth and depth. What made chili such an ideal working-class meal wasn't just its affordability, it was its ease of preparation. You could throw everything into a pot, let it simmer for a while, and walk away. As it cooked, the house filled with the irresistible smell of slowly developing flavors, beckoning everyone to the table. Chili was a meal that kept you full, not just because of the ingredients, but because it was the kind of food that made you feel satisfied on a deep, soul-nourishing level. As the years went by, chili became a symbol of family gatherings, especially during winter or fall. Whether it was served with cornbread, a slice of homemade bread, or topped with a dollop of sour cream and shredded cheese, chili became a meal that was associated with warmth and togetherness. It was the ultimate comfort food, perfect for filling up the kids after school or providing a late-night meal for someone who'd been working hard all day. Chili wasn't just a dish. It was a reflection of a culture rooted in family, resourcefulness, and the joy of sharing a meal. 7. Pot roast with root vegetables. Few meals have the ability to fill a home with the rich, welcoming aroma of a hearty dinner quite like a pot roast. The slow-cooked, tender beef surrounded by carrots, potatoes, and onions served as the centerpiece of many working-class dinners for decades. It's the kind of meal that says, come on in, sit down, and rest a while. Pot roast wasn't just about feeding a family. It was about creating an experience, one that centered on warmth, togetherness, and the simple satisfaction of a good meal after a hard day's work. Pot roast, or braised beef, has been around for centuries, but it truly became a symbol of the American working-class meal during the 20th century. For families living on a budget, it was the ideal dish. It could be made in a single pot, making cleanup easy, and it could be stretched to feed several people. The best part about pot roast was how the flavor developed over time. The longer it cooked, the more tender and flavorful the beef became, soaking up the juices and herbs from the vegetables and spices surrounding it. Making pot roast was a labor of love that required time and patience, but it wasn't difficult. You started with a tough cut of beef, typically a chuck roast, which would cook down into a tender, melt-in-your-mouth piece of meat. The roast would be browned in a hot skillet, then placed into a heavy pot with onions, garlic, carrots, and potatoes, and covered with broth. Slow cooking it for hours allowed the flavors to meld together in a glorious way. As the beef cooked, it would release its juices, creating a rich, savory gravy that would coat everything on the plate. Pot roast was the kind of meal that brought families together around the table, making it a favorite for Sunday dinners. It was also a dish that could be made in advance and enjoyed for several days, which made it an even more attractive option for families on tight schedules. Whether it was a Sunday afternoon gathering or a weeknight dinner after a long day of work, pot roast had the magical ability to transform any meal into something special. It wasn't just about the food, it was about the memories made around the table, the laughter shared, and the satisfaction of knowing that everyone would leave the table full and content. Pot roast is a reminder of how meals used to be made, slowly, lovingly, and with care. It's the kind of dish that feels like home, a warm embrace on a chilly evening. And while it may not be as common today as it once was, it remains a beloved classic that continues to evoke fond memories of a time when cooking was both a necessity and a pleasure. 8. Ham and beans. Ham and beans, simple, straightforward, and filling, was a go-to meal for hardworking families across America, especially during the colder months. There's something so comforting about this dish, a bowl of smoky, tender ham served with hearty beans, all stewed together into a rich, flavorful stew. It's the kind of meal that fills the house with warmth and makes you feel like everything is going to be all right, no matter how tough the day has been. Ham and beans are rooted in the traditions of both rural America and the immigrant cultures that shaped the country. The dish's origins go back to the days when nothing was wasted in the kitchen. Leftover ham from a holiday feast or a smoked ham hock would be simmered in a pot with dried beans, creating a dish that was both affordable and incredibly satisfying. Beans were inexpensive, and ham, while initially a luxury item, could be stretched into multiple meals, making it the perfect choice for families on a budget. The beauty of ham and beans lies in its simplicity. The ham adds a smoky richness, while the beans, whether navy beans, pinto beans, or great northern beans, absorb all the flavors from the meat and seasoning. The slow cooking process allows the beans to become tender and flavorful, while the ham breaks down into soft, juicy pieces. Some recipes added onions, garlic, or a touch of vinegar to balance the richness of the dish, creating a flavorful, hearty meal that was perfect for cold evenings. Ham and beans were also a meal that could easily be made in advance. You could throw it together in a large pot, let it simmer for a few hours, and enjoy it for several days. For families with children or anyone working a long shift, the idea of having a meal ready and waiting was priceless. And while ham and beans may seem like a humble dish, there was something deeply satisfying about sitting down to a bowl of it after a day of labor. It was a reminder that sometimes the simplest meals are the best. For many, ham and beans were synonymous with home. It was a dish that was often made in big batches, served at the family table, and savored for days. It was also a meal that could be shared with others. Whether it was a neighbor in need or a guest at the dinner table, this meal was made to be shared. 9. Sloppy Joes. Sloppy Joes, messy, saucy, and undeniably delicious, were the epitome of a quick, no-fuss meal that could feed a family after a long day of work. There's something about the simplicity of a sloppy Joe that makes it so satisfying. Ground beef, onions, a tangy, tomato-based sauce, and a soft hamburger bun come together to create a sandwich that's both comforting and filling. It's the kind of meal you can't eat without getting a little sauce on your shirt, but that's part of the fun, isn't it? Sloppy Joes became a staple of working-class America in the 1940s and 1950s, but their roots go even further back. The dish is believed to have originated from a similar sandwich called a loose meat sandwich, which was popularized in the Midwest in the early 20th century. The basic idea was simple: seasoned ground meat served on a bun, but the addition of tomato sauce or ketchup gave it the sloppy Joe we know and love today. For families on tight budgets, sloppy Joes were a lifesaver. Ground beef was cheap, and a can of tomato sauce or ketchup was easy to keep on hand. You could make a big batch of sloppy Joe filling in no time, and it would feed a crowd. The dish was also easy to customize. Some people added bell peppers or other vegetables for extra flavor, while others kept it simple with just onions and seasoning. Whatever the variation, the result was always the same: a satisfying, filling meal that didn't take much time to prepare. Sloppy Joes became especially popular in the 1950s, when families began to embrace the convenience of fast and easy meals. They were perfect for busy weeknights when everyone was rushing around. Plus, they were a hit with kids who loved the messiness and the sweet and tangy flavor of the sauce. This was a meal that wasn't just about eating. It was about having fun with food, gathering around the table, and enjoying a dish that everyone could get excited about. In the decades since, sloppy Joes have remained a comfort food favorite, even as dining habits have evolved. There's something timeless about them, something that recalls a simpler time when meals didn't need to be fancy to be good. Sloppy Joes are the kind of food that you can throw together in a pinch, but they always feel like a treat. 10. Tuna casserole. Tuna casserole, with its creamy sauce and comforting texture, is the quintessential working-class casserole. It's the kind of dish that brings a family together around the dinner table, filling up hungry bellies and warming the soul. Made with canned tuna, pasta, peas, and a can of creamy soup, this casserole was a lifesaver for busy families in the 1950s and 60s. Not only was it affordable and easy to make, but it could also be prepared in advance and served for several meals, making it the perfect choice for hectic weeknights. The humble beginnings of tuna casserole can be traced back to the Great Depression and World War II, when families needed to make meals stretch as far as possible. Canned tuna, an inexpensive protein, became a pantry staple, and it wasn't long before people began creating meals like tuna noodle casserole, which could be made with just a few basic ingredients that were always on hand. Over time, the dish evolved, and different regions added their own twists. Some versions included breadcrumbs on top, others used mushrooms or different types of cheese. Regardless of the variations, the dish always maintained its reputation as a comforting, easy-to-make meal. For working-class families, tuna casserole was a staple because it was affordable and filling. Canned tuna was an inexpensive protein that could stretch across several servings, and the creamy sauce made from canned soup tied everything together, creating a dish that was rich and satisfying. And of course, the pasta was an ideal base, adding bulk and substance to the meal. Tuna casserole became synonymous with comfort food during the mid-20th century. It was a dish that families could count on when they didn't have a lot of time to cook or when the budget was tight. It was also incredibly versatile. Whether you were using elbow macaroni, egg noodles, or even potatoes, the result was always the same: a creamy, savory casserole that could feed a crowd. For many families, tuna casserole is one of those dishes that brings back memories of home. The smell of it baking in the oven, the satisfaction of that first bite, and the sense of togetherness around the table. While it may not be as popular today, tuna casserole remains a beloved classic for those who remember it from their childhood. It's a dish that's as much about nostalgia as it is about flavor. 11. Cornbread and buttermilk. Few dishes, hearty, are as synonymous with the American South as cornbread and buttermilk. This simple yet deeply satisfying meal has roots in early American history, a time when resourcefulness and using what was available were the keys to survival. Cornbread, made with just a handful of ingredients like cornmeal, flour, eggs, and buttermilk, is a dish that has been passed down through generations, filling bellies and warming hearts. Cornbread has long been a staple in the homes of working-class families, particularly in the rural South, where corn was abundant and inexpensive. The beauty of cornbread lies in its versatility. It can be sweet or savory, served as a side dish or a meal in itself. The basic version, made with cornmeal, flour, buttermilk, and a bit of baking soda or powder, provides a savory, hearty base. Whether baked in a skillet, a pan, or even a Dutch oven, the cornbread always comes out with a crispy golden crust and a soft, crumbly center. But what truly elevates cornbread is the pairing with buttermilk. Buttermilk, once a byproduct of churning butter, became a necessary ingredient in the Southern kitchen. It's tangy and rich, with a texture that complements the slightly sweet, dense crumb of cornbread. A glass of cold buttermilk served alongside a warm slice of cornbread can transport you back in time to simpler days, where meals were made with whatever was on hand, and every bite felt like a small luxury. Cornbread and buttermilk were especially favored by working families for their affordability and ease of preparation. It was a meal that didn't require expensive ingredients or long preparation times. For many, cornbread and buttermilk were eaten at breakfast, lunch, or dinner, sometimes even as a snack when the hunger pangs between meals struck. For a long day of work in the fields or at the factory, cornbread was the ideal fuel. It could be eaten on its own or paired with a variety of other dishes like beans, greens, or fried chicken. The meal had a humble yet fulfilling quality that filled the belly and gave the body the energy it needed to continue on. The tradition of cornbread and buttermilk is still alive today, although it might not be as common as it once was. But for those who remember the joy of biting into a fresh slice of cornbread and washing it down with a cool glass of buttermilk, it's a reminder of a time when meals were simple, comforting, and full of love. 12. Beef stew.
Today we're doing a beef stew.
There's nothing quite like a bowl of hearty beef stew to warm you from the inside out after a long, cold day. Beef stew has been a go-to meal for working-class families for generations, offering both comfort and sustenance. The rich, savory broth, tender chunks of beef, and hearty vegetables combine in a way that makes every spoonful feel like a satisfying reward. It's the ultimate one-pot meal, easy to make, filling, and perfect for feeding a crowd. Beef stew has its roots in the traditional stews made by European settlers, but it became a staple of working-class kitchens in America due to its simplicity and ability to stretch ingredients. Tough cuts of beef, often considered less desirable, were simmered for hours to break down and become tender, releasing rich flavors into the broth. This slow cooking method was ideal for families who needed to make a little bit of meat go a long way. Along with the beef, vegetables like carrots, potatoes, onions, and celery were added, creating a filling, nutritious meal that could be enjoyed for days. For many working families, beef stew was a welcome meal, especially during the colder months. It could be made in advance and served throughout the week, with each day's batch tasting even better than the last as the flavors melded together. Beef stew was also one of those meals that seemed to bring everyone together. The slow simmering process filled the house with a savory aroma, drawing the family to the table at the end of a busy day. What made beef stew so beloved was its versatility. You could use whatever vegetables were on hand, parsnips, turnips, or even peas, and the seasoning could be adjusted based on what you liked. A little salt and pepper were often all that was needed, though some cooks added bay leaves, garlic, or thyme for extra depth of flavor. The key to a great beef stew, however, was in the slow cooking. The meat needed time to become tender, and the broth needed time to develop its rich, savory depth. Beef stew is a dish that requires patience, but the result is worth every minute. It's a meal that embodies the values of working-class America: resourcefulness, hard work, and a sense of togetherness. As you sit down with a bowl of hot, comforting beef stew, it's not just the food you're savoring, it's the tradition of home-cooked meals and family meals that made this dish a staple on dinner tables for generations. 13. Liver and onions. Liver and onions. Love it or hate it, this dish has been a mainstay of working-class kitchens for decades. It's a dish that evokes memories of family dinners where nothing went to waste and where every ingredient had its place in the meal. The rich, iron-packed flavor of liver, combined with the sweetness of caramelized onions, creates a dish that's as hearty as it is affordable. For many families, liver and onions were a meal that filled bellies and nourished the body after a long day of work. Liver, often beef or chicken liver, was a cheap and readily available protein, especially during times when meat was scarce or expensive. It was also incredibly nutritious, packed with iron, vitamins, and minerals. In the days before easy access to supplements, liver was a natural source of the nutrients that many working-class families needed to stay healthy. Pairing liver with onions helped balance out the strong, sometimes gamey flavor of the liver with the sweetness of the onions, creating a dish that, when cooked right, could be downright delicious. The preparation of liver and onions was simple. The liver was usually pan-fried, cooked until golden on the outside and tender on the inside. The onions, sliced thin, were sautéed in the same pan, absorbing all the savory drippings from the liver. Some cooks added flour to make a quick gravy, while others kept it simple, letting the natural flavors shine through. The dish was typically served with mashed potatoes or rice, providing a creamy contrast to the richness of the liver and onions. For many families, liver and onions was a meal made on a budget, but it was also a meal full of love and care. Liver wasn't considered a luxury meat, but it was filling, nutritious, and could be prepared in large quantities. It was a dish that could be enjoyed by the whole family, no matter how many people were gathered around the table. While liver and onions may not be as popular today as it once was, it remains a cherished dish for those who grew up with it. It's a reminder of a time when families made the most of what they had, using every part of the animal and turning it into something delicious. Liver and onions may be an acquired taste, but for many, it will always hold a special place in the heart of working-class comfort food. 14. Goulash. Goulash is one of those dishes that can take you on a journey, from its roots in Hungary to its beloved status in American working-class kitchens. This hearty, comforting stew of beef, vegetables, and spices has evolved over time, adapting to whatever ingredients were on hand. Its simplicity, richness, and ability to feed a crowd made it a favorite for families looking for a filling, budget-friendly meal. The origins of goulash can be traced back to 9th century Hungary, where it was originally a dish made by herders, consisting of beef, onions, and paprika cooked in a pot over an open fire. The dish spread across Europe, and by the time it reached the United States, it had undergone various transformations. In America, goulash became a staple of the working class during the mid-20th century, especially in cities and industrial towns where families were looking for affordable ways to feed a large number of people. Goulash in its American form often featured ground beef, pasta, and tomatoes, along with onions, garlic, and spices like paprika. It was a one-pot dish, perfect for busy families who didn't have much time to prepare dinner. The beef was browned, then combined with vegetables and tomatoes, creating a rich, savory base. The pasta was added later, soaking up all the flavors as it cooked in the sauce. The dish was incredibly filling and could be made in large quantities, making it ideal for feeding a crowd. For working families, goulash was the ultimate comfort food. It was easy to prepare, used affordable ingredients, and could be made in advance and reheated for several meals. It also had the kind of flavors that made you feel satisfied with just one bowl. The blend of tender beef, hearty pasta, and savory sauce made every bite comforting, while the paprika and garlic provided just enough heat to keep things interesting. Over the years, goulash has become a nostalgic favorite for many who grew up eating it. It's a dish that represents the ingenuity and practicality of working-class families who made the most of what they had and turned it into something delicious. Goulash isn't just a meal. It's a reminder of a time when food was simple, satisfying, and made with love. 15. Baked ziti. Baked ziti, cheesy, saucy, and comforting, is the kind of meal that can turn an ordinary dinner into something special. The combination of tender pasta, rich marinara sauce, and a blanket of melted cheese creates a dish that's both satisfying and indulgent. It's the ultimate comfort food, beloved by families and working-class households across the country, especially during the 1950s and 1960s, when Italian-American cuisine began to permeate the American dining scene. The origins of baked ziti lie in Italian-American kitchens, where pasta was a staple of everyday life. Ziti, a type of tube-shaped pasta, became the perfect base for a baked casserole dish. The dish was often made with tomato sauce, ricotta cheese, and mozzarella, then baked in the oven until the cheese melted and the edges turned golden brown. It was the perfect dish to feed a crowd, made with affordable ingredients that could easily be doubled or tripled to feed a larger family. Baked ziti was also a meal that could be prepped in advance. Many working-class families took advantage of its ability to be made in bulk and stored in the fridge for later. This made it an ideal option for busy households, where parents worked long hours and needed a meal that could be quickly reheated. The dish was filling and hearty, providing enough sustenance to fuel everyone for the rest of the night. For many, baked ziti became a symbol of family dinners. It was often served during gatherings and celebrations, where everyone gathered around the table to share a warm meal. The comforting flavors of pasta, cheese, and tomato sauce had a way of bringing people together, and the dish's easy preparation meant that it could be made for any occasion, from a weekday meal to a special Sunday dinner. While baked ziti may have started as a simple Italian-American casserole, it has become a classic comfort food for working-class families everywhere. It represents everything that makes working-class cooking so special: resourcefulness, heart, and the ability to turn simple ingredients into something extraordinary. And of course, it's the kind of dish that makes you feel right at home the moment you take your first bite. 16. Chicken pot pie. If there's one dish that perfectly encapsulates the essence of comfort food, it's chicken pot pie. This golden, flaky pastry shell, filled with creamy chicken and vegetables, has been a staple on working-class dinner tables for generations. The very act of breaking through the crust to reveal the rich, savory filling inside brings a sense of satisfaction that few meals can match. Chicken pot pie has its roots in the homes of hardworking families, offering a way to transform leftover chicken or poultry into a warm, hearty meal. In the days before convenience foods and fast takeout, nothing went to waste in a family kitchen. Leftover chicken, after a roast dinner or from a weekend chicken fry, would be simmered down and combined with a medley of vegetables, carrots, peas, and celery, into a creamy sauce. The whole mixture would then be encased in a buttery, homemade pie crust and baked until the top was golden brown and delicious. For families on a budget, chicken pot pie was a way to stretch a small amount of chicken into a meal that could feed several people. The vegetables added bulk and nutrition, while the creamy sauce provided richness and comfort. The pie crust, flaky and golden, added the final touch, transforming what could have been a simple casserole into something special. The preparation of chicken pot pie was also a labor of love. The crust, whether made from scratch or from store-bought dough, required a bit of effort to perfect, but the result was always worth it. When that pie emerged from the oven, bubbling and fragrant, it was like a beacon of warmth and homecoming. The creamy filling, rich with the flavors of roasted chicken, paired perfectly with the flaky, buttery crust. Each bite was a reminder of the care and attention that went into making the meal, and how food can bring people together. Chicken pot pie was also a meal that could be made in advance, allowing busy families to prep it in the morning and bake it later in the day. The leftovers were just as comforting, and some even argue that the flavors deepened after a night in the fridge. Whether enjoyed fresh from the oven or reheated the next day, chicken pot pie was a meal that always felt like home. It's a reminder of simpler times when cooking was an act of care, and a hearty, filling meal was just a crust away. 17. Fish fry. The fish fry is one of those meals that brings people together, transforming an ordinary day into something special. Whether it was a Friday tradition in a small town, a summer ritual by the lake, or a Sunday gathering after church, the fish fry was the meal of choice for hardworking families who wanted something satisfying and social. Crispy, golden fish fillets, fried to perfection, served with hush puppies, fries, and coleslaw. There's something about the combination that makes you feel like you're sharing a meal with old friends. The origins of the fish fry can be traced to the rural South and Midwestern America, where fishing was a way of life. For many families, fishing wasn't just a hobby, it was a means of providing for the family. Fresh fish like catfish, perch, or bluegill would be caught in local lakes and rivers, then breaded and fried in a hot pan or deep fryer, making a meal that was both affordable and delicious. The process of frying fish in cornmeal batter became an art form in these communities, with each cook adding their own secret blend of seasonings to the mix. The beauty of the fish fry was its simplicity. The fish, fried until crispy and golden, were the star of the show, while the sides of fries, hush puppies, and coleslaw provided the perfect balance. The hush puppies, cornmeal fritters fried until crisp on the outside and soft on the inside, were often served alongside the fish, adding an extra layer of flavor and texture. Coleslaw, cool and tangy, was the perfect accompaniment, cutting through the richness of the fried fish and providing a refreshing contrast. For working-class families, the fish fry was the ultimate comfort food. It was a meal that could feed a crowd, making it perfect for gatherings. Whether it was a family reunion, a church picnic, or just a Friday night after a long week of work, the fish fry was a social event as much as a meal. The process of breading and frying the fish together created a sense of camaraderie, with everyone contributing to the feast. It was a time to sit down down, relax, and enjoy the fruits of one's labor. While fish fries may not be as common today as they once were, they still hold a special place in the hearts of those who grew up with them. The memories of family gatherings, the smell of frying fish, and the joy of sharing a meal with loved ones are things that never fade. The fish fry isn't just a meal. It's a tradition that brings people together and reminds us of the importance of slowing down, enjoying good food, and creating memories with those who matter most. 18. Chicken fried rice. Chicken fried rice is one of those dishes that perfectly embodies the resourcefulness of working-class cooking. With just a few basic ingredients, chicken, rice, vegetables, and soy sauce, this dish becomes something far greater than the sum of its parts. Whether it's made with leftover rice from the night before or cooked fresh, chicken fried rice is a meal that's both quick and satisfying, making it a favorite in households where time and money are often tight. The origins of fried rice can be traced to Chinese cooking, where rice was stir-fried with whatever ingredients were available. The dish was popularized in the United States as part of Chinese-American cuisine, which became a staple in urban working-class neighborhoods. Chicken fried rice, in particular, found a place on dinner tables because it was affordable, easy to make, and could be made with whatever ingredients were on hand. Chicken fried rice is a dish that benefits from the versatility of its ingredients. The chicken, whether dark meat or breast, adds protein, while the rice serves as the perfect canvas to absorb all the savory flavors. Carrots, peas, onions, and sometimes even scrambled eggs are added to the mix, adding color, texture, and nutrition. The dish is seasoned with soy sauce, garlic, and sometimes a touch of sesame oil, creating a savory, umami-rich flavor that makes every bite irresistible. What makes chicken fried rice so beloved is its ability to turn humble leftovers into a flavorful, satisfying meal. If there's one thing working-class kitchens have taught us, it's that nothing should go to waste. Leftover rice, bits of chicken, and a few vegetables could be transformed into a dish that felt like a treat, even though it was made from simple ingredients. It's a meal that feels like it was created out of love, a way to make the most of what you have and turn it into something delicious. Chicken fried rice also represents the melding of cultures, as Chinese immigrants brought their cooking techniques to American kitchens, where they were embraced and adapted. For many families, it became a meal that could be prepared quickly on busy weeknights, offering a balanced dish in a short amount of time. While fried rice is a dish that's now popular across the globe, chicken fried rice will always hold a special place in the hearts of those who grew up with it. It's a reminder that sometimes the best meals come from the simplest ingredients and from making something wonderful out of what's already on hand. 19. Pork and sauerkraut. Pork and sauerkraut is a meal that carries with it the echoes of generations past. This simple yet flavorful dish, with its tender pork and tangy sauerkraut, has been a staple in the kitchens of working-class families, particularly in areas with a large German immigrant population. It's a meal that's not only affordable and filling, but also steeped in tradition, a dish that's been passed down for generations, loved for its bold flavors and comforting nature. The origins of pork and sauerkraut lie in the Germanic culinary traditions brought to America by immigrants in the 19th century. Sauerkraut, fermented cabbage that developed a tangy, sour flavor, was an important part of German cuisine, especially during the long, cold winters. Pork, often a mainstay in the diet of rural families, was the perfect meat to pair with the tangy cabbage, as it could stand up to its strong flavors. The dish was simple, relying on just a few ingredients: pork, sauerkraut, onions, and spices, to create a filling, flavorful meal. For working-class families, pork and sauerkraut was a go-to dish because it was both economical and hearty. Pork, especially cuts like pork shoulder or chops, was inexpensive and could be cooked low and slow, becoming tender and juicy. The sauerkraut, which had a long shelf life, could be kept in the pantry and used year-round. As the pork simmered with the sauerkraut, the flavors melded together, creating a rich, savory dish that was perfect for a family dinner. The beauty of pork and sauerkraut lies in its simplicity. The pork was typically browned in a skillet before being slow-cooked with sauerkraut, onions, and a little bit of caraway seeds or bay leaves. The result was a flavorful, tender pork that absorbed the tangy notes of the sauerkraut, creating a dish that was both comforting and satisfying. Often served with mashed potatoes or boiled potatoes, pork and sauerkraut was a meal that left you feeling full and content. This dish also carried with it a sense of tradition. For many, pork and sauerkraut were reserved for special occasions, New Year's Day in particular, when it was believed to bring good luck. But it was also a meal that could be enjoyed on any given weeknight, a meal that connected families to their heritage and their roots. Today, pork and sauerkraut may not be as commonly served as it once was, but for those who remember it, it will always be a reminder of the rich cultural traditions that shaped American working-class cuisine. 20. Stuffed bell peppers.
We're making some easy, delicious stuffed peppers. So let's get started.
Stuffed bell peppers are the epitome of a working class meal. Simple, affordable, and deeply satisfying. This dish, with its vibrant sweet peppers, stuffed with a savory mixture of ground meat, rice, and seasonings, has been a favorite in American kitchens for generations. It's the kind of dish that brings comfort to the soul, filling the house with its warm, savory aroma and offering a delicious, balanced meal in one neat package. Stuffed bell peppers have their roots in both European and Middle Eastern cooking, but they truly became an American staple during the 20th century. Ground meat, usually beef or pork, was mixed with rice, spices, and vegetables, then stuffed into hollowed-out bell peppers. The peppers were baked until tender, allowing the flavors of the filling to meld with the sweet, slightly smoky flavor of the peppers. The dish could be customized based on what was available. Some families added cheese to the top for a gooey, melty finish, while others kept it simple with just meat and rice. For working-class families, stuffed bell peppers were the perfect way to stretch a small amount of meat into a satisfying meal. The rice helped to bulk up the filling, making the dish more filling without adding much cost. The bell peppers themselves were inexpensive and added both flavor and color to the meal. Stuffed bell peppers were also incredibly versatile. You could swap the ground beef for turkey, chicken, or even beans to make the dish fit your budget or dietary preferences. The beauty of stuffed bell peppers was in their simplicity and their ability to be made in large batches. You could make a dozen at a time, baking them all at once and feeding a crowd. Leftovers could be enjoyed the next day, making them even more convenient for busy families. The dish also required little in terms of preparation time, allowing parents to focus on other things while the peppers baked in the oven. Stuffed bell peppers are more than just a meal. They're a symbol of working-class ingenuity and love. The act of filling those peppers, of transforming simple ingredients into something hearty and flavorful, represents the creativity and care that went into feeding a family. Whether served on a Sunday night or during a busy week, stuffed bell peppers are a reminder of the simple joys of cooking and the satisfaction of sharing a meal with those you love. 21. Baked beans and hot dogs.
And this episode is about making these edible. The best recipe you ever seen for franks and beans or beanie wings.
Baked beans and hot dogs, a meal so simple yet so full of heart. This dish, often served on a busy weeknight or at a summer picnic, embodies everything that made working-class meals great. They're affordable, filling, and capable of feeding a crowd without much effort. There's a certain comfort in the pairing of tender beans with the smoky flavor of grilled or pan-fried hot dogs. Together, they create a meal that tastes like home, evoking memories of family barbecues, gatherings, and the kind of dinners that came together with ease but were cherished just the same. Baked beans have long been a staple of American cuisine, especially in rural and working-class communities. The beans, typically navy or pinto beans, would be simmered in a rich, flavorful sauce made from molasses, brown sugar, mustard, and a touch of smoky bacon or pork. The slow-cooked beans would absorb all of these flavors, creating a dish that was both sweet and savory. For families on a budget, baked beans were an ideal choice because they were not only inexpensive, but also incredibly hearty. They could be made in large batches and served with a variety of dishes, from grilled meats to homemade bread. Hot dogs, on the other hand, were the perfect complement to the beans. Often seen as a quick and easy protein source, hot dogs could be grilled or fried and served alongside just about anything. They were affordable, portable, and easy to prepare, making them the go-to option for busy parents who didn't have much time to cook. Their smokiness added depth to the sweet beans, while their simplicity made them the ideal counterpart to the rich flavors of the baked beans. Baked beans and hot dogs were a meal that could be whipped up in no time, but still felt satisfying and complete. For many working-class families, it was a dish that could be prepared with minimal ingredients and effort, but still leave everyone feeling full and content. Whether served with a side of cornbread, potato salad, or just a slice of buttered bread, this meal was one of those timeless combinations that worked well every time. For those who grew up with it, baked beans and hot dogs are more than just food. They are a reminder of the times when meals didn't have to be complicated to be good. It was about simplicity, resourcefulness, and family, all packed into one delicious plate. 22. Stuffed bell peppers. Stuffed bell peppers, vibrant, colorful, and satisfying, were a staple meal in many working-class households. A dish that combined simple ingredients into a hearty, comforting meal. It's a dish that captures the beauty of resourceful home cooking, using affordable, everyday ingredients to create something that feels both nourishing and special. The combination of ground meat, rice, and vegetables stuffed into a tender bell pepper is a reminder of how food can be both filling and flavorful, while still being easy to prepare and easy on the budget. The origins of stuffed bell peppers trace back to Eastern European and Mediterranean cuisines, but the American version became particularly popular in the mid-20th century. Ground beef, rice, and various seasonings were mixed together and packed inside bell peppers, which were then baked in the oven until tender. For working-class families, stuffed bell peppers were a great way to stretch a small amount of meat. The rice added bulk, making the meal more filling without adding much cost, and the bell peppers, once stuffed, could serve as individual servings, making it an easy meal to dish out to a hungry family. What made stuffed bell peppers so beloved was their versatility. You could easily adapt the filling to suit your family's tastes or dietary needs. Some people added tomato sauce or cheese on top, while others used ground turkey or pork instead of beef. The dish was a perfect vehicle for using up leftovers, and it could be made in large batches, ensuring there was enough for everyone. Plus, the peppers themselves added a layer of sweetness and earthiness that complemented the savory filling, making every bite a delicious balance of flavors. The beauty of stuffed bell peppers was also in their simplicity. You didn't need fancy ingredients or complicated techniques, just a few basic pantry staples, some fresh peppers, and a little love to turn it into something special. It was the kind of dish that could be prepared in advance, popped in the oven, and ready to serve after a long day of work. And like many great working-class meals, it was the kind of dish that could be enjoyed by the entire family, filling their bellies and bringing them together at the table. For many who grew up with it, stuffed bell peppers are a symbol of home-cooked comfort, of creativity, love, and making the most of what you have. It's a meal that can be made on a budget, but still tastes like something made with care. 23. Roast chicken with vegetables.
And today on Preppy Kitchen, we're making a perfectly delicious roasted chicken. So let's get started.
Roast chicken with vegetables, a dish that has the power to turn any meal into a celebration. With its crispy golden skin and tender, juicy meat, a perfectly roasted chicken is one of life's simple pleasures. When paired with hearty, roasted vegetables like potatoes, carrots, and onions, it becomes a meal that's not only satisfying, but also comforting in a way that few dishes can match. For generations, this humble yet elegant dish has been a staple of working-class kitchens, often served on Sundays or for special family gatherings. The roast chicken has a long history in American cooking, particularly in the South and Midwest, where poultry was a common protein. Roasting a whole chicken allowed families to get the most out of the bird, feeding several people with one bird, while still offering a variety of textures and flavors. The skin would crisp up as the chicken roasted, while the meat underneath became tender and flavorful. The addition of vegetables, which were roasted alongside the chicken, allowed the flavors to meld together as the meal cooked, creating a complete dinner in one pan. For working-class families, roast chicken was an affordable option that could be stretched to feed a crowd. The meat could be served with mashed potatoes, cornbread, or even biscuits, and the leftover chicken could be used in soups, sandwiches, or casseroles for the following days. This made roast chicken not only a comforting meal, but a resourceful one as well, turning one meal into several. The preparation of roast chicken was simple, yet the results felt special. The chicken would be seasoned with salt, pepper, and herbs like rosemary or thyme, then placed in the oven to roast. The vegetables, carrots, potatoes, onions, and sometimes parsnips, would be tossed in olive oil and seasoning, roasted alongside the chicken until golden and crispy. The smell of roasting chicken would fill the house, drawing everyone to the table and signaling that a meal was ready to be enjoyed. Roast chicken with vegetables is a meal that brings people together. Whether served on a Sunday afternoon or as a comforting weekday dinner, it's a meal that's full of tradition, warmth, and the kind of flavors that evoke a sense of home. It's a reminder of a time when meals were made with care, and the kitchen was the heart of the home. 24. Salisbury steak.
Today, we're gonna make Salisbury steak. If you haven't had this before, if you think of cafeteria food, don't. It's delicious.
Salisbury steak, savory, tender, and full of flavor, is the kind of meal that can take you back in time to an era when the working-class dinner table was filled with hearty, comforting food. This dish, made from ground beef, onions, and seasonings, resembles a hamburger patty, but is served with a rich brown gravy that adds depth and richness to the meal. Often served alongside mashed potatoes or rice, Salisbury steak was a meal that could feed a family on a budget without sacrificing flavor or satisfaction. Salisbury steak has its roots in the late 19th century, named after Dr. James Salisbury, a physician who promoted a diet focused on lean beef as a cure for various ailments. The dish became popular in the early 20th century, particularly during the Great Depression, when ground beef was an affordable protein source. Families would shape the ground beef into oval patties, sear them in a pan, and then simmer them in a savory gravy made from beef broth and onions. For working-class families, Salisbury steak became a staple because it was an economical way to stretch ground beef and feed a crowd. The gravy added richness, making the dish feel indulgent without being expensive. The versatility of Salisbury steak made it a favorite too. It could be served with mashed potatoes, noodles, or even a side of vegetables. The dish also had the benefit of being easy to prepare in large quantities, allowing families to make enough for several meals. Salisbury steak was a meal that required minimal ingredients, but delivered maximum satisfaction. The combination of seasoned ground beef and the savory gravy made for a comforting, filling dish that could easily become a family favorite. It wasn't just a meal, it was a reminder of how simple ingredients could come together to create something special. While Salisbury steak may not be as popular today as it once was, it remains a beloved classic for those who grew up with it. It's a meal that represents working-class ingenuity and the ability to create something delicious out of what's available. Salisbury steak, with its rich gravy and tender beef, will always hold a special place in the hearts of those who remember it. 25. Baked potato with toppings. The baked potato, simple, humble, and utterly satisfying, is a meal that's been a staple for working-class families for decades. It's the kind of dish that can be enjoyed on its own or dressed up with a variety of toppings to make it feel like a complete meal. From a plain, crispy-skinned potato with butter to a fully loaded baked potato piled high with cheese, sour cream, bacon, and chives, this dish represents the beauty of simplicity and the joy of a meal that's made with love, no matter how little you have. The baked potato has been a part of American cuisine for centuries, but it became particularly popular in working-class kitchens in the mid-20th century. Potatoes were inexpensive, filling, and could be prepared in a variety of ways. Baking them was one of the simplest methods, requiring nothing more than a hot oven, a few pricks with a fork, and patience as they cooked to perfection. The crispy skin and tender flesh of a well-baked potato were a treat in themselves, and the toppings were where the magic happened. For many families, the baked potato became a go-to meal for busy nights when they didn't have much time to cook. You could bake a batch of potatoes, set out a variety of toppings, and let everyone customize their meal. Whether it was a generous scoop of butter, a sprinkle of cheese, a dollop of sour cream, or crispy bacon bits, the options were endless. Some families even turned baked potatoes into a full meal, adding chili, vegetables, or leftover meats to create a filling, satisfying dish. The beauty of the baked potato is its versatility. It could be eaten as a side dish or a main course, and it was inexpensive enough to feed an entire family without breaking the bank. The potato itself was filling, and with the right toppings, it became a meal that could please even the pickiest eaters. The ease of preparation, the low cost, and the ability to personalize each serving made the baked potato a beloved favorite in working-class homes. Today, baked potatoes may not be as commonly served as they once were, but for those who grew up with them, they're a reminder of simpler times when meals didn't have to be elaborate to be comforting and satisfying. The baked potato is a symbol of working-class ingenuity, resourcefulness, and love. It's a dish that, no matter how simple, can always feel like home. As we've journeyed through these 25 working man's dinners, it's hard not to feel a deep sense of nostalgia for a time when meals were made with love, care, and a good dose of resourcefulness. These are the dishes that fueled long days of hard work, dishes that were shared around family tables, where the simple act of eating together became an expression of love, comfort, and resilience. In a world where quick fixes and takeout meals have become the norm, we can sometimes forget what it felt like to slow down and truly savor a homemade meal. These working-class dinners weren't about fancy ingredients or intricate recipes. They were about making the most of what you had, about finding joy in simplicity, and about coming together to share a meal that would carry you through the next day's challenges. Meals like country fried steak with gravy, meatloaf, and biscuits and sausage gravy weren't just about filling stomachs. They were a reflection of a time when cooking was a communal act, when families worked side by side in the kitchen, sharing in the preparation of something that would nourish them physically and emotionally. These were the dinners that made a house feel like a home, the meals that told stories of sacrifice, hard work, and perseverance. As we reflect on these recipes, it's clear that the true power of food lies in its ability to connect us. The way a dish can evoke memories of home, of family, and of a time when things were a little simpler. It's easy to get caught up in the rush of modern life, but these meals remind us to take a step back and appreciate the beauty of home-cooked food, made with heart and care. So let's not forget these meals. Let's bring them back into our kitchens, share them with the ones we love, and pass them down to the next generation. Because while the world has changed, the importance of a good, hearty meal, one that brings people together, hasn't. These are the dinners that will always have a place in our hearts and on our tables. Here's to the working man's dinners. May they never be forgotten, and may they continue to nourish us, body and soul, for years to come.